Hi everyone, welcome to another week of our Singer Summer Sewing Workshop. My name is Meredith, one of the Singer Educators. In this week's episode, I'm going to be sharing with you quilting techniques for creating a summer beach-inspired table topper. I will show you how to create a scrappy quilt-as-you-go ocean and how to easily piece a sandy border around it. I will demonstrate my techniques for transforming your colorful fabric stash into a custom turned-edge appliqué to complete your beach scene. Finally, I'll share my tips and tricks for how you can finish your table topper and how to master those tricky mitered corners. You're going to start by taking a square of fabric. It doesn't have to be straight, even lines on all sides, just a four-sided shape. And you're going to put that right side up in the middle of your quilt batting. Then you're going to take another piece, again, four-sided. It doesn't have to be an equal square all the way around. You're going to put that right side down and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew those two pieces together. You're then going to fold that top piece over, right side up now, and you're going to quilt on it. I chose to just stitch in the ditch and then do straight line quilting as I went. You'll take a ruler and measure the distance that you need from one piece to the next, and then again, just cutting an abstract piece of fabric. It can be four-sided, three-sided, anything. You just want the same distance roughly from one piece to the other. And again, you're going to sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That top piece is right side down, and then you're going to flip it over. Again, I'm not doing any fancy quilting or anything like that. I'm just stitching in the ditch. So when you're going through this point, go a little bit slower, just verifying that your needle is going in between the two seams, that it doesn't hit the fabric on either side. You want it to sort of be invisible. And then I'm just quilting straight lines. I think they were all about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch distance. They weren't even all the way around. I wanted it to be sort of different, a little bit in the way of waves in the ocean in that way. What I love about the Singer Patchwork 7285Q is that it has a needle up and down button. You'll see right there the needle position. The red light is engaged. So when I stop sewing, my needle's going to stop in the down position so I don't lose my place. I can raise my presser foot, rotate and turn my fabric, and continue sewing just as easily without losing my position. I love the Learn to Quilt kit. It has this smaller cutting mat and smaller ruler so that when you're doing these quilt-as-you-go scrappy quilt pieces, you can cut small pieces, not have the big mat or the big ruler in the way. You can cut your pieces four-sided, three-sided, move them around easily, whatever size you need, and it's all right there at your fingertips. You'll notice that I sometimes overlap previous quilting pieces more than others. It really just depends on which angle you're going at, which side of the quilting that you've already done. It's all up in the air. That's what makes this so fun, is there's no rhyme or reason. You just keep turning and picking new pieces, new sizes, and making it work for what you're doing. You'll notice also that my quilting lines, I love that they don't go the same way also. Again, it gives that effect of waves, different directions, things like that. So that was my whole purpose for this. I didn't want it to look the same all the way around. Again, you'll notice that I stitch along the raw edge of the pieces that I'm doing. It helps hold them in place a little bit more so that when I'm doing those straight lines, I'm quilting it out as I go and it's holding the entire piece in place. This is a slow and steady process, so just work with it, just have fun with it, keep going, cut different pieces, you'll notice I have different shades of fabric, some with designs, or I say texture on them, some that are just solid. Have fun with it. There's so many different options you can do. You'll continue this entire process until you have a large square. My finished square was 20 by 20, and I ended up cutting that down to 16.5 by 16.5. I wanted to have more than what I needed just so I could cut it down to the size that I was hoping for. It helped also to have a larger piece to cut down so that if I needed to recenter because I put more fabric on one side of my initial center square than the others, then I could do that easily and still have it centered. Next, I added my border pieces, and they were 5.5 inches wide were my strips. And again, it all depends on how big your final center quilt as you go piece is. Mine was 16.5 by 16.5. So I did the left and right sides first. I cut 2 strips, 16.5 by 5.5 was the width of them. I sewed both of those on the left and right. And then I measured the top all the way across. Now with the binding, again, 5.5 inches wide, and sewed my 2 strips on the top and bottom to give that full border effect all the way around. Next, we're going to create our turned edged applique. I just found a clip art photo of a beach ball online, and I enlarged it to the size that I wanted to fit within the size of my table topper that I was looking for. I then took a piece of medium weight fusible stabilizer. It's one-sided fusible, and what I'm doing here is I'm tracing around my pieces of the beach ball. What you want to keep in mind is you want your fusible side down when you're doing this, and you also don't want to draw all of these lines connected, because you are going to cut these into different pieces so that you can have different pieces to your beach ball, different turned edge applique. So you'll notice that all of my pieces are separated, and I was mindful of numbering them so that I didn't get them out of order also. Once you've done that, you're going to cut all of these pieces out. Unless your beach ball is going to be all the same color, then you can just put your fabric along the way I'm going to show you here in a moment. But I wanted mine to be alternating colors versus white, so I cut them all out individually. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take one of those pieces, and you're going to, again, your lines that you drew are going to be up, and the fusible side is going to be on the right side of your fabric that you're going to make your turned edge applique. So I've got right sides together, or I shouldn't say right sides, I should say fusible side to the right side of the fabric. And I lowered my stitch length for this because I have some tight curves on some of them. Again, you want to use your needle up and down position, and you're going to slowly turn as you go. If you hit a curve, don't force your fabric into that curve. Lower your needle down, then turn your fabric in that way, because when you start to force that curve, you will get wrinkles within your fabric. But having a shorter stitch length will help with this. But again, you do want to turn your fabric when possible with your needle down. You're going to continue this process for all of your pieces. Some will be larger, some will be smaller. Again, just making sure that the fusible side is down, that the writing that you did on the stabilizer is up, and your fabric is right side up. It doesn't have to be exact. We're just roughly going around these pieces. And you're going to do this for all of the applique pieces that you create. You'll notice here with the smaller pieces that I'm making those adjustments. Every couple stitches, I'm raising my presser foot, turning my fabric a little bit so that I don't have some excess buildup of fabric underneath as I'm turning. Once you're done, you're going to take all of your pieces and cut roughly a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. I'm snipping my corners and my points, but then I'm just snipping my curved edges so that my stabilizer will turn in easily into the piece once I've flipped it. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to pull apart your stabilizer from your fabric so that when you snip your stabilizer, you're not going to snip your fabric. Once you do that, you're going to cut a little bit of a slice on the back side of the stabilizer, and then you're going to turn your fabric and stabilizer right side out. So now you will have the right side of your fabric out along with the fusible side of your stabilizer out. You can use your scissors or a sharp point to push out those corners. Be careful that you don't push those seams out completely. Just work slowly with this as you go. Once all your pieces are cut out, you can lay them all out to make sure everything lines up how you would like it. I ended up cutting my center piece of my beach ball a little bit larger so that it would overlap with the edges of my, the inside of my beach ball pieces. I wanted it to kind of be like layered dimensional on top of each other. Once you have them all cut out and laid out, you can put it on your table topper or whatever it is you're sewing it onto, line them out. I'm only putting my beach ball pieces, not the center circle one on here, because I want to sew all of them together first. So you then fuse them down. Again, you had your fusible side out, so that will stick to your table topper now. Next, we're going to do a blanket stitch, and I am using invisible thread on top and my regular white cotton quilting thread on the bottom. I didn't want to see these stitches. I wanted them to be hidden, especially because I was using different colors of fabric. I didn't want to use white on top of my yellow and red and so forth, so I did an invisible thread on top and my quilting cotton on the bottom. I then lowered I narrowed, I should say, my blanket stitch so that it just barely caught the left edge of my fabric, and I just worked my way around all of my pieces. You can see here that it just barely catches it and holds it in place more than just fusing it down would do. You're going to continue this process of sewing down all of your pieces using this blanket stitch all the way around your beach ball until you get them all sewn down. Again, it's best to stop with your needle in the down position so that you don't lose your spot where you were sewing, raising your presser foot and then turning your quilt as you go around the curves and the corners and things like that. I then fused down my center circle so that it overlapped all of the beach ball pieces, and again, same process using the blanket stitch and sewing all the way around this circle, stopping, raising my presser foot, making those adjustments with my quilt so that I'm not puckering everything underneath. Once you've sewn all of your applique pieces down that you want, I did a beach ball and then an umbrella and a shell. I quilt sandwiched batting between this entire top piece as well as backing. So your backing is going to be right side down, then you have batting, and then you have your top piece right side up. I'm then going to take the safety pins that came in the quilting kit that I got and sort of hold this whole quilt sandwich together so that I can do all over quilting all around it. This may seem like extra work, but I can tell you in the end, it is very helpful to have this and holding all of these pieces in place so that they're not shifting and you're not getting wrinkles and the buckling underneath. We're then going to put our walking foot back on that we had on earlier. We want to make sure that there's a little fork bar and make sure that that goes over the needle bar. That's what makes the walking foot move up and down. And then for mine, I didn't want to take away from my applique pieces and the quilting that I had already done. So I went around this entire thing and did stitch in the ditch. I went along my applique pieces, sewing really close up alongside them. I'm just using a straight stitch at this point, not a blanket stitch or anything, because everything's already sewn on. But this is just creating that quilting effect. And when you look at the back side, you'll see the outline from the umbrella or from the beach ball, anything that you made from the scrappy quilt as you go that you did. You can see all of those lines on the back side, but on the top, you're just sewing really close and you're not gonna see it. They are gonna be hidden. For this, I did not use my invisible thread. I just used my regular cotton thread, white, and it's just hiding in the seams here. Take your time with this process. If you come up along to a safety pin, take that safety pin out. Obviously, you don't want to sew over that. Just work your way around the entire thing. I start from the outside and work my way in. It just depends on what you're doing. I started from the edge and sort of moved my way around methodically to make sure that I did not miss anything. I love that we have the space underneath the 7285Q Singer patchwork to roll up. You can see here I'm rolling it as I go when I get the bulkier parts so that it is out of the way. Once we're done, you'll notice when I made my quilt sandwich, I had about an inch overhang from my backing and my batting, and we're just gonna square up all the way around our table topper once we are done. This next step isn't necessary, but it is a little tidbit trick that I always do. I will do a seam and overcast stitch. So this is basically a serged edge stitch along the edge, and this bastes your quilt top with your batting and your backing and keeps it all in place so that you don't have any of that shifting when you add your binding on. Next, we're going to create our binding. You can buy pre-made bias binding. I wanted it to blend in with my sand already, so I use the same border fabric for my binding. Again, we're just attaching these on the angle there, doing a straight stitch across, and then I'm going to cut these down and then press them over so that they're all evenly, and it gives me one long strip versus just 42 inches my width of my fabric. I'm making long enough to go around my entire quilt sandwich. You'll see here, this is where I'm cutting them down. I'm just cutting with a 1/4 inch seam allowance off the excess corner there. And then we're gonna go over to our ironing board and press these open. You wanna make sure that you're pressing them all the same way as you do. I don't press them open, I just press to one side or the other. Then we're gonna make our bias binding, and what we're gonna do is we're going to press our strip the entire way across in half. Then we're gonna open it and press inward the edges halfway onto that middle seam that we pressed. And then we're gonna fold the entire thing in half, and that's gonna give you your bias tape. I'm then going to take my bias binding and I'm going to leave about 10 to 12 inches excess at the end of it, of my strip that I'm going to use at the end to put my pieces together. But I'm going to put my quilt sandwich between it and I'm going to sew all the way to the edge. I'm sewing about a 1/4 inch seam there. You're going to sew all the way to the edge, stopping right at the end and then pulling your quilt sandwich out and snipping your threads. You're then going to push in the next side to make your mitered corner. Some people make it, say it looks like a paper airplane or a T. I use a little bit of Elmer's glue stick on the back side and the front of those corners just to hold them in place, and I can move them around a little bit, get that perfect mitered corner that I'm looking for, and then I can use a pen or a clip to hold it in place. I make sure to put that pen through the back as well so that when I start sewing, I'm catching both the back and the front. Put my needle back down into my binding and then continue sewing. And you just want to make sure that your quilt sandwich is pushed into the center of your bias binding that you've made or that you pre-purchased. Just sewing along the entire way. Again, I sewed about a 1/4 inch off to make sure that I caught my top and my bottom as I sewed. Again, we're going to sew all the way to the end. We're going to stop, reverse, and then I'm going to pull my threads out and snip them. I'm then going to push in to make my mitered corner. It looks like a paper airplane or a T. I'm going to use just my little bit of glue to hold it in place there to get that perfect mitered corner edge. When you work your way all the way back around, I leave about 8 to 10 inches of an opening there, and then I'm going to cut off the end of one of them, a piece of my bias strip. I'm going to open that up completely, and I'm going to lay one end of my binding strip over it, and I'm going to cut it right there at the edge. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other piece. I'm going to lay it over top. Again, still making sure that my first piece is lined up with the edge right there with the piece that I cut off as reference. Lining this up and then cutting at the same point but on the other side of my reference piece right there. Then what you're going to do is you are going to pull that gap, that opening that you have there, I use a pen or a clip, putting it together so that it's, I don't have that resistance against me trying to line up my binding strips here. Then I'm going to line up my binding strips the same way that I sewed them together initially, with the wrong sides together, and we're going to sew at an angle the same way that we did when we sewed our strips together. And this is going to give you the look of a continuous binding strip with not having to have more than what you need. So where my pin is, the angle that I have it in, is the angle that I'm going to sew my finished line seam right there. We're then going to cut off the excess there, again leaving about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And then once you take your clip out holding your quilt sandwich together, it will all fall into place just like the binding that you've sewn on the entire way. You can use clips or pins to hold it in place as you sew, just making sure that those raw edges are pushed under to create that bias fold on your binding the way we did when we started. We're going to start just right after we ended, and we're going to continue sewing down, and you will have your continuous binding. And it looks like one complete finish without having that overlap of your binding pieces. Thank you for joining me today on our latest summer sewing workshop series. I hope I've inspired you to want to try a new quilting technique. If you are wanting to learn more about the Singer Patchwork 7285Q, you can find more information on our website, singer.com. Thank you.